Hey guys, welcome back to the DCF podcast. My name is Tanner. I've got a really exciting show for you today. We are joined, this is going to be my first guest who is not working for DCF. I'm joined by a good friend, Dave McDermott. He has flown in here from Chicago, Illinois.
Thanks for having me here today, yes.
Thank you so much for coming out, man.
Absolutely.
Dave is a good friend of ours through USCCA. So for anybody at home watching who doesn't realize, DCF just did a partnership with USCCA. So you are able to not only get all of our normal memberships that give you access to range and discounts on everything in the store, but now we have bundled it with USCCA coverage. And so we're going to get into kind of the importance of USCCA coverage. And how you can save money through that. But I'm really excited because Dave came in here. Dave, let's give him a little bit of background on who you are. So you are a self-defense attorney out of Chicago.
Correct. Out of wherever I need to be, but yes.
Yeah, I was going to say you bounce around all over.
In Chicago, yeah.
Perfect. And you have been doing, how long have you been doing self-defense cases?
Self-defense cases, I mean, in general, I've been an attorney for 27, 28 years in criminal defense, but self-defense itself is something that's really picked up. It's become its own niche area of law. It's not that we didn't have self-defense cases since the beginning of time, obviously.
Right.
But with the emergence of all these, all this additional crimes, specifically violent crimes, specifically targeting people in these violent ways, in this violent manner, many people have gone out purchasing firearms to defend themselves, especially with the additional criticism that surrounds our law enforcement.
Correct.
And what they can and can't do because of it, and all these different laws that are put in place, more or less to protect criminals. I don't want to go off on a rant, but there's a lot of different things that have changed. The system's changed a bit, and so a lot of people are out arming themselves, and because of that, a lot of people are being criminally charged after they've discharged their firearms to defend themselves, which is pretty sad, and that itself has really become a substantially more significant issue for the last, I'd say, about 15 years, 10, 15 years.
Yeah, there's been a big uptick. Yeah. So, and I'm really excited to have you on the show because I always deal with before anything happens. So my job is always preparing people with the right equipment, the right firearms, the right training so that they can actually defend themselves and their loved ones. But I'll have to admit, I myself am kind of clueless when it comes to after the fact.
The aftermath,
right?
yeah.
I think everybody knows what they would do in the event, or they like to think what they would do in the event that they had to defend themselves. But what I wanted to get into with you is kind of, you've pulled the trigger. Now what? What can someone expect if they do find themselves in a situation where they have to defend themselves specifically with a firearm?
What you can expect? Well, I tell people as quickly as you can pull the trigger, you can go from being a victim to a defendant. And it's kind of like who's going to defend you after you've had to defend yourself. And that's basically where I come in, these situations. And there's a whole host of different things you can expect, but it really depends on how far the prosecutor's office is going with the case. Okay. So initially what you can expect, obviously, is police are going to show up. So that's no surprise. And depending on, whether you hit, whether the person that was actually attacking you was struck by, a bullet or bullets, you're also going to see paramedics there as well. So what you expect is you're going to be surrounded by a bunch of different people that are trying to, as quickly as possible, gather information so they can ascertain exactly what happened and make a determination as to how they're supposed to proceed based on whatever it is that they're there to do.
Right. And they're all showing up to the scene cold. They're not amped up. You, on the other hand, as the person who maybe just fired their weapon, is probably in the most fearful state of your life. You've just gone through something most likely for the first time, and it's probably pretty traumatic. And I like to think that you are probably at your worst possible state to be answering questions.
Exactly.
And giving statements.
Exactly.
As to what happened.
So, and I really appreciate the good training. So I just want to step back for a minute because the training, what you do, DCF, what you do actually is so significant in the totality of things, in the bigger picture, because the training really helps to get people in a better place when they're dealing with this. It helps us when we are meeting with people that are trained, that have training, that have been properly trained, that have been properly educated in the space.
And they can explain why they did
because
something.
Because we can better, we are able to help them much easier. There are a lot of people that go out and purchase firearms and don't give any weight to the significance of having training and having education behind it.
I deal with it all the time. I think you're right. Ever since 2020, really with COVID,
very much.
we saw a huge spike in firearms purchases. The two largest growing demographics of people buying firearms were African Americans and women, right?
Yep.
Especially when it came to getting CCWs. So I think you're right. We've got this this climate of fear. There's no getting around it. Back in 2020, you had riots, you had civil unrest, and you had a plague sweeping the nation, right?
Absolutely.
And so people were freaked out.
And then you had restrictions on what police could do to get involved with that on top of all that. So you've got this perfect storm, so to speak. Well, it's perfect for the criminals. So.
And so what I found a lot is people used to kind of have this idea of, oh, I just need to go to the store, I buy a gun,
and I'm set.
I shoot it once a year at the range with the buddies, I do some mag dumps, and I'm good. And the reality is first off, shooting it's totally a diminishing skill. I mean, I train with my guys in the store every week. If I go a couple of weeks without shooting, it's amazing how rusty I am.
It's crazy.
But also one thing that we talk about a ton in our classes, I don't think people understand the adrenaline dump in a situation like that. And we had, for those of you guys who don't know, Dave has been doing some legal seminars at our DCF locations. And one thing we talked about last night is I think people have an idea in their head, probably from movies, that you're going to go into a situation and it's going to be almost choreographed. And the reality is that violence is extremely fast, and it is extremely aggressive and violent. And most of the time, people have trouble even explaining what happened after the fact.
Right? Absolutely. And there's as much training as there is, as much as you can educate, as much as you can train yourself. In so many different facets of this world, you can't possibly train yourself the psychological, mental, emotional, physical significance of what you're about to encounter when this happens. And I have people I represent that served in the military, actively served, that were fired upon and that fired on the enemy. And they themselves in these situations, it's a very foreign situation to them as well.
Well, I was thinking about this last night because in our industry, the default, whether it's lots of times like instructors, they're almost always prior military, right? And in this industry, it's usually those are the guys that are looked to as experts. But the reality is the way that you're going to engage the enemy in a military conflict is it has absolutely nothing to do with how you're going to be defending yourself in a civilian state. So, like I said, that's why I'm really excited, because I think that so many people have an idea in their head of how this stuff is going to go, and the reality is very different, both in how you're going to be treated by the police, how you should respond to police, but also the ridiculousness of our legal system, how big and consuming it can be. So, going back to, let's say you'd pull the trigger, the police are going to show up. Paramedics are going to show up. In your opinion, what should you be saying to police? Should you be saying anything to police?
As little as possible.
Okay.
As little as possible. Nothing is best, but sometimes nothing isn't going to work. So, aside from the identifying who you are and providing your identification, if in fact that's requested, if I could have somebody memorize what they should say, which I don't trust anybody to memorize this, but if I could have somebody memorize what they're going to say, it would be something along the lines of, "Officer, I intend to cooperate 100% with your investigation. I'd just like to have my attorney present before doing so." Because then I come into the situation and I play the bad guy and I say my client's not going to say anything. And going back to the fear, because you had talked about the fear a moment ago, just what that encompasses. People, there are people that train all the time that under this type of fear can't shoot the way obviously they can shoot when they don't have that type of fear. There are people that that are aware of what to say and what to do that completely can't remember that any of those teachings at a time. So it's really from an abundance of training and from an abundance of education that you start developing some sort of muscle memory, some sort of knee-jerk reaction to whatever's going to happen. The more you actually train, the more you educate, the better position you're going to be in, which is why I was saying that it's so important what DCF does. And so when we get involved in these situations and people start talking to the police, they don't understand, when we're talking about that fear, they don't understand how that fear affects them in so many different ways. It's not just what they're saying, but it's also how they're saying it. So, because you don't have any control, you don't really realize. You could be crying and not realize that you're crying. You could be yelling and not realize that you're yelling, which is another thing. A lot of people call 911. A lot of people are instructed to immediately call 911. I'm not a fan of that. You have to realize that, or what you should just assume, for the sake of assuming, right? Assume that every single thing that you're doing, from the point that you're pulling the trigger to the point that you're in the courtroom, God forbid you're brought into a courtroom.
Right.
Assume everything that you're doing is being recorded. Assume that, because that's one of the best ways you could possibly prepare yourself for what's to come, which is the system. And the system, many people regard the system as them being far more fearful of the system than they were of the person that was initially attacking them.
Oh yeah.
I mean, regardless of the level of fear that this individual put them in when he or she was attacking, the individual with the firearm that's defending him or herself, regardless of what type of fear they're in, it seems to be compounded. It seems to be exponentially worse when the system comes in, because what people don't realize is that when you talk about the aftermath, it includes so many different things. It includes a potential, obviously it includes a potential arrest and everything that surrounds itself with the arrest. But it also includes the fact that you're being taken into custody, and you are now the prosecutor, depending on if you killed this individual that you're defending yourself against, the prosecutor likely is asking that you not be given a bond. And if you are given a bond, that it be an incredibly high bond.
Right.
You're losing your job during this time frame, despite the fact you haven't been found guilty. Very often people are losing their jobs because employers are not responsible for the intentional acts of their employees. However, if an employer is put on notice that an employee has a propensity for violence and continues to hire, continues to retain that individual, they are now on notice. And so if something happens to somebody else, they have to be worried. So their attorneys, these employers' attorneys, are saying, hey, you can't keep this person working here. So very often you're losing your job. You could potentially be losing your liberty as the case is pending. And that's aside from the fact that you've got this long-term cloud over you where they're looking for life imprisonment potentially, or depending on the jurisdiction, potentially life itself, all because you defended yourself or defended somebody else under these circumstances. So the minute something like this happens, the reason I answered your question that way is just assume that you're always on camera, that everything is being video recorded, that everything is being audio recorded, is because everything that's happening from the point you pull that trigger all the way through the rest of this process, everything that's happening is just another bit of information. It's just another bit of evidence. So for example, if you contact 911 following a shooting, you contact 911, the job, you're not speaking to the police. I tell people this all the time. You're speaking to dispatch, and the job of dispatch is to gather information. So you're starting to provide information. And what people don't understand is that there's no information you can be providing that's going to be helpful for your case. As a general rule. Okay, because generally speaking, anything you're saying is considered hearsay. And hearsay, generally speaking, is inadmissible during the course of the trial. But there are exceptions to hearsay. And one of the most popular exceptions in these types of circumstances is when you make a self-incriminating statement. That's why we have Miranda. That's why you're told that you have the right to remain silent. Anything you say can and will be used against you. So people don't understand when they're providing this information, whatever words they're using to describe the situation and the fact that it's being recorded, those words can only be used against them. Because there's an exception to hearsay if you're saying something that's against your own penal interest. If you're saying something that's self-incriminating, they can use that during the course of a trial. They can use that against you. But you can't in turn use all the positive stuff that you just said as a general rule.
That's wild. So it can be used to incriminate you.
Exactly.
But it can't be used to
help you.
Wow.
Yeah. And people don't understand that. And the more people start to understand that, Tanner, the more people start to realize the significance of what I just said, the less they're going to want to talk. They've been told not to talk. So getting back to what I was saying, you've just been involved in a self-defense shooting. I've yet to meet with somebody that thought, that they weren't defending themselves as
Right.
it happened. So
Yeah.
let's take both of these things together. You've been involved in the shooting. You're now speaking to the law. You're speaking to the good guys, and you're telling them, "Hey, I'm a good guy too.
Yeah.
I was just being attacked.
I defended
This person
myself.
This person just tried carjacking me. This person just tried robbing me. This person just came into my home.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't invite him in. I have no idea how they got in.
Yeah.
I'm the good guy. I'm defending myself. I shot this person because I was scared to death, and
Right.
anybody would be scared to death in these circumstances.
Right.
And you're not saying that, but that's where your head is.
No,
I know I didn't do anything wrong. So you are expanding, you are expounding, you're providing a whole bunch of information right now describing why it is that you did what you did, because you're convinced that you had to do what you did, and you're convinced that what you did was correct, what it was right, and it was justified.
Yeah.
So what's happening later, at some point later, assuming they decide to criminally charge you, is they're cherry picking from the different statements that you provided.
Yeah.
And they're looking to see, first off, did you provide a different statement to this person than you provided to that person, and where the difference is? And they're trying to provide this type of information to the judge or jury throughout the course of the
Right.
trial to show that, hey, you weren't even consistently providing the same information.
Right.
And you don't even know that.
And they're going to discredit you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it just doesn't, it's from the start, it doesn't make any sense to provide that information.
So a couple of questions come to mind there. You had talked about the loss of your job. Talk about how long does a typical case take if it actually goes to trial?
Well, it really depends on the magnitude of the charge as a general rule. Murder, because that's the thing that grabs people's interest most. And it also depends on the jurisdiction, depends on the state. But murder, there was something came out in the papers not long ago in Cook County in Chicago saying that the average murder trial takes approximately 7 years before it commences,
Right.
before it actually
Yeah,
goes
7
forward.
years.
So think about that from a self-defense standpoint. You just defended yourself.
Yeah.
You're being criminally charged with murder. And the prosecutor is arguing that you should be kept in custody until the time of your trial,
Which could be 7 years.
which could be 7+. If that's average, then think about it.
Right.
There's a lot longer beyond that.
Yeah, and that's nuts because we have this idea in our head that it's this one traumatic event. It's just that we're going to look back on, it was that one night. When in reality, that one night turned into
Yep.
years of your life.
Yep.
I want to just get a couple of facts out of the way, just for people who are watching. So obviously, it can take a really long time. How much does taking a case to trial typically end up costing? I know that it's going to vary based on the cases.
It varies based on a lot. So I try cases, as you know, I try cases all over the country. I just had I had back-to-back trials in Compton, California, in LA County, and I think they had us starting the trial each day. I want to say that we were starting the trial at 10 a.m. Then we had a lunch break. That was, by the way, in the morning you had like some sort of 15-minute break for the jury in this particular courtroom. Then you had a lunch break that was an hour and a half long. I think it was an hour and a half long lunch break. Then you had the afternoon, you'd come back and you had at least one, potentially two additional 15-minute breaks, if I remember correctly. And then they would stop at 4 p.m. each day. So the reason I'm saying this is there's not much you can get through in a day if you have all this downtime and you're starting late and you're finishing early.
Right.
So certain jurisdictions are like that. Certain judges are like, we're going to go as late as we can. I got to cut my courtroom staff. I got to cut them some slack. I'm going to let them out for this long. We're going to have a quick break, so we're going to get back to it. It really depends on the judge in the courtroom, in the courthouse, in the county. It depends on so many different circumstances to really dictate that. But I'd say, on average, if you shot somebody and your bullet actually hit this individual, struck this individual, on average, out of my office, it's probably going to be minimally about $250,000 all in by the time you're in trial, on a minimal, on a low end. So the ones in Compton, the last one that I just had, I was representing a 67-year-old great-grandmother, wonderful person who was being criminally charged after she defended herself. That all in was I think it was either just shy or just north of $500,000.
Wow.
And I mean, there's no way that woman would have been able to afford services if she didn't have a defense plan. And you referenced the USCCA in the very beginning. She's a USCCA member.
Yeah.
And they paid all of her court costs, all of her attorney's fees, all costs, and there were some additional things that were wrapped up in there as well that they also covered.
No, it's a huge deal. I mean, USCCA, like I said, it is a fantastic offer. Without getting into all the specifics, they do offer bail money, which is huge because, like you said, in some situations, the judge might set a bail so high that the average person doesn't have an option aside from putting up their house.
Right.
Right, and that's just
retirement. We see this because we represent a lot of people that don't have coverage, and they literally are draining retirement accounts and having different family members put their properties, mortgage their properties, take additional mortgages out to be able to go ahead and pull together money. And it's scary for so many different reasons. I mean, the system is so aggressive. They immediately make you aware of how much time you're looking at for whatever the charge is. And they make you aware of that because they know they have that over you. They know that that's going to be hanging over you the entire time. So if there's discussion, go ahead.
I was going to say, it's terrifying, man. When you think about it, the state has limitless resources for persecuting you, or prosecuting you, sorry. And we're just average Joe Schmo people working regular jobs, and most people don't have hundreds of thousands of dollars set aside for legal fees.
And don't know where to go. So not only do they not have it, but they don't even know where to go. Where do I go for help? I mean, the majority of, I'd venture to guess the majority of attorneys that are practicing in criminal defense area of law, I'd guess that the better majority of all those, of all defense attorneys really have just misdemeanor experience and some low-level felony experience. So you start going into different attorneys' offices, you have no idea who has any real experience in that particular area that you're being charged in. So you're being charged with murder, for example. There aren't that many attorneys that have actually had any murder experience.
Yeah, have actually taken a case to trial and won.
Not just that, there are very few attorneys that have been trusted with even having to do anything with murder cases to begin with. And you have to also factor in the fact that I'd say about 95% of all criminally charged matters result in a plea.
Right.
So just I mean, let that settle.
Yeah.
Not you, but people that are listening, let that settle. If most attorneys are negotiating pleas for whatever reason on behalf of their clients, if most of these cases are being resolved by way of a plea, and you're looking at a case where you could be going to prison for the rest of your life, you're potentially getting advice, and it's not just to slam the profession.
I'm sure you have plenty of more examples than me, but I can't tell you how many times I've seen situations where somebody felt they were defending themselves, they felt they were doing the right thing, but they were looking at two options. They said, I can take a plea and I'll get out in 3 to 5, or I risk going. You risk it all. It's like going all in at blackjack, and maybe it'll work out, or maybe it'll do 25 to life. Yeah. Right. And it really is an impossible decision for a lot of people to make, especially, like you said, if you don't actually have coverage. This kind of goes back into another question that I want to ask you, but before I do, I'm going to stroke your ego a little bit. So the reason that we're having Dave on, guys, is obviously he is an expert in this matter. You have spoke at Congress.
Yes.
You are considered a self-defense expert in these matters, and you have, now correct me if I'm wrong, you have never lost a self-defense shooting case.
That's correct.
Right.
Yeah.
So let's say that I just find myself in an incident, but I'm totally innocent, right? Somebody broke into my house, they're threatening to kill me, my fiance, I defended myself. When I'm looking for that attorney, like you said, and I'm trying to figure out where I'm supposed to go, why should, if someone is truly innocent, why should they go with a higher powered attorney like you versus like a public defender?
Well, it's a great question. First off, I'm not one of those people that subscribes to the notion that public defenders don't know what they're doing. There's some great attorneys in public defenders' offices throughout this country. I think they get a bad rep because they don't have necessarily the time to be able to dedicate specific energy to this particular file when they've got X amount of files that are on their desk, and they're really, a lot of them are really, exactly, they're very much overloaded, so it's very overwhelming. But there are some great trial attorneys in the public defender's office, because what people don't really appreciate or understand about the public defender's office is a lot of people that have private attorneys, a lot of them make decisions not to go forward with the trial, to take a plea, in part not just because of the fact that they're dangling this carrot in front of them saying, hey, we'll give you 20 instead of, you're looking at life on this murder case, we'll give you 20 years. Not just because of that, but also because of the tremendous amount of expense that goes into it.
Yeah,
so a lot of people
I can't afford this.
will back off. In the public defender's office, they are appointed to represent you if in fact you qualify, which means they can't back off. If you want a trial, they have to proceed with the trial. So as a general rule, they're being forced into into the ring on cases that they wouldn't otherwise be litigating, because people don't don't have to worry about the cost of it to themselves or their family. So they often have a lot of trial experience that private attorneys don't. But to answer your question is, why you go to an attorney at all if you're going to a private attorney? Why do you go to a private attorney to represent you when you haven't actually done anything wrong? You know that what you did was right. There are always at least two sides to every story, right? Let's just start there. The prosecutor has already adopted one side.
Yep.
Think about that. Now, a prosecutor's office, just like the public defender's office, you have to graduate certain levels to get to where you're at. So if you're dealing with a murder case in a prosecutor's office, as a general rule, you don't just have a couple of years, a few years experience. You have significant experience, because you had to graduate all these different, you had to graduate the misdemeanor phase, and then the misdemeanor trial phase, and the felony review phase.
Right.
Minor felony phase. You had to be a third chair potentially, a second chair, and a first chair, because they assign different levels of who's really in charge of each of these courtrooms. So you have to go through all this to be able to get to a first chair, being in charge, running your room, and being the person that's actually prosecuting a murder case. The reason I say this is you have a tremendous amount of experience, and you've already signed on to the notion that John Doe is guilty.
Yeah.
So it doesn't matter. Now, John Doe can feel I'm not guilty at all, I did everything right. But you've got an experienced litigator that's going to be coming after you with all the resources that the state has backing that prosecutor.
Yeah.
Not only that, but the prosecutor's office has all the evidence served up to them on a platter. They get all this information provided to them. They have the police working for them, more or less. I mean, indirectly.
Yeah.
But the police are providing them with all this information. The police are providing them with all this evidence. They have clear channels for communication with these different individuals that are working in these different aspects of this case. So the investigators, not just the responding officers, but the investigators, the state police that are generally the ones that are overseeing the chain of custody and getting out to the labs to do all the lab testing. The people that are actually doing the labs, they can get on a phone and immediately contact all these different individuals, and they have all the resources, not just human resources, but financial resources to go ahead and carry this case across the line.
Yeah.
You have your version of what happened, and your conviction, and you're up against someone with all that experience, with all those resources.
Well, and it may not necessarily be what the truth is or what happened. It's what can be proven.
I love the fact that you said that, because I define truth for my clients. All the time. Yeah. And it's a bit of a slap in the face to a lot of people, because they in my world I know what the truth is in my world.
Saw it,
and they've now entered my world. And so me introducing them to the truth is very different from what they understand the truth to be. So I tell them, I say, look, say the guy lived. The complaining witness, what the complaining witness is saying happened isn't what happened.
It's totally different. Yeah.
What the police are saying happened isn't what happened.
Yeah.
I say what these other witnesses that witnessed it are saying happened isn't what happened. And here's the crazy thing, because it becomes a bit of a riddle, but I said, you know what? What you're saying happened, that's not, no, excuse me, I apologize.
Yeah.
Start back over. What they're saying happened is not the truth. What the complaining witness is saying is not the truth. What the police are saying is not the truth. What the witnesses observed and they're testifying to is not the truth. What you're saying about what happened is not the truth.
Right.
And if we have video, and the video shows everything about what just happened, everything. Say we had technology to show it all and to show it in great quality. You could see everything.
Yeah.
That's not the truth.
Hmm.
So the question, what actually happened? That's not the truth either.
Right.
So what are you left with? What is the truth?
No, again, this is...
Do you know what the truth is at this point?
It's whatever you can prove.
It's whatever the judge or the jury believes to be the truth, because that's what's going to depend whether you walk out of that courtroom with me or whether you get taken back.
Yeah, if you're a judge, it actually is an impossible task because you've got 6 different versions of the same night from different people's perspectives, and your job is to actually swim through all that and figure out a fair verdict. Yeah, no, that's bizarre to think about.
Well, you don't leave prejudice out, though, Tanner. You can't leave prejudice out because you have to, because that's a question people ask very often. You know, should I go forward with a bench trial in front of the judge, or should I go forward with a jury trial?
Yeah. No, that was a good question I wanted to ask you. So, if you're defending someone, do you prefer to convince one person or 12 people in a jury?
So first off, to be fair, just based on how the system was actually founded, and it's a great question for a number of reasons, but for an additional reason which you might not realize. You say, would I prefer to convince one person or 12 people? And what people don't really understand, the way the system is supposed to be, is the state has the burden of convincing.
Correct.
The defense doesn't.
Yeah.
So, but it's a very fair question, because inherently, as we all know, it's not a perfect system.
Right.
It's flawed, and it's not a system of very often when it comes to shooting, especially when it comes to shooting cases, because these aren't self-defense. You're not being charged. This isn't a self-defense case. I call them self-defense cases. I refer to them as self-defense cases, but they're murder cases. They're attempt murder cases. They're ag bad with a firearm cases. There are a number of different things, but they're not called self-defense cases.
Correct.
Self-defense obviously is the affirmative defense that you're asserting on behalf of, that I'm asserting on behalf of a client. But when you say would I prefer to try to convince the one person or try to convince the 12 people, it goes both ways, obviously, with the 12 people, because when the state has to convince all 12 of them, basically, according to the law, they have to convince all 12 of them. The verdict has to be unanimous, and they have to unanimously say that somebody is guilty, because if they don't unanimously say somebody is guilty, if you have just one person holding out, I don't know if you ever saw, what is it? Is it 12 Angry Men?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Or no, 2 Angry Men.
12 Angry, I think it was 12 Angry Men, whatever. You know what I'm talking about. The situation here is, if just one person is holding out for the defense and will not change his or her mind, that's going to be a hung jury. It's going to be a mistrial.
Yeah.
And then the state has to determine whether they're going through this whole thing all over again. They're probably going to make a more favorable offer, and probably still going to, if it's a murder charge, it's probably still going to go forward with the trial unless you take the more favorable offer. And their arguments can be, we're going to be better prepared.
Gotcha.
We already know where this is going, so we can go ahead and shore things up, and we'll get the guilty a second time around.
Yeah.
But the reason I'm saying this is that they technically have to convince 12 people. The answer to that question, though, it's not, the focus isn't on whether it's 1 or whether it's 12. In my experience, the focus is on who the audience is.
Okay.
So, without getting political, when it comes to guns, when it comes to firearms in general, certain people are very anti-firearm. We just know that.
Right.
I mean, just very anti-firearm. And certain people believe that if you're carrying a firearm, if that's what you choose to do every day, and you end up using that firearm, you're going to be responsible for your actions, regardless of what the heck's going on.
Yeah.
And there's always going to be the argument. This argument's being made to the state's attorney's office. It doesn't matter. Johnny was robbing him. Johnny's got a bunch of different problems. Johnny needs some money. Johnny's on drugs or whatever. He shouldn't have been doing it, but he didn't deserve to die. And your client, they're looking at me, they're looking to the jury, saying this individual took Johnny's life because he took the laws into his own hand. And he just executed him. That's what the argument is.
No, like so. When you talk about prejudice, there is plenty of people who believe that if you were walking around carrying a gun, you're looking for trouble. Which is where the problem
comes in, because a lot of those people, some of those people, I should say, wear a black robe.
Yeah. No, that's a
And
good
you
point.
have to dig. You have to dig, and you have to find out. You also go into certain communities where you know those communities inherently are not gun-friendly communities. I go to southern Illinois, certain parts of southern Illinois, for example. There's a particular county I go to where I know the bulk of the people that have a job are either at the hospital
Yep.
or they're the university.
Yeah.
And I know just because of that, unfortunately, because stereotypes do play out here when you start doing your research, certain people with certain occupations are more prone to favor or not favor certain actions or certain types of cases.
Yeah.
So you have to take all that into consideration. You have to get a good idea of where you're at. You also have to take into consideration the emotional stock that runs with the case, the emotional value.
No, I mean, it's a really interesting point that I hadn't considered much. Some of these cases get so high profile, and they go countrywide, and everybody. We talked about this a little bit last night as far as Monday morning quarterbacking. Everybody has an idea of how it should have gone down. I think one of the best examples of prejudice and stuff before the trial would probably be the Rittenhouse case. When I was living in Chicago actually when the verdict when he got off, and I remember as soon as I saw the videos, everything I saw, I said he's going to get off. I could just tell based on every situation. I was like, in all these situations, he was being attacked. It didn't change the fact, though, that I had an idea of what in the hell was a kid that age doing, running around with an AR-15 playing Call of Duty, right? And so that's where I think it gets so difficult for people because, yes, according to if you're just looking at the law and just looking at the facts, no, dude, every one of those were justified shootings. He was trying to flee. He was trying to get away in every situation. But it didn't change the fact that there was the human side of me that just goes, what was his mom doing letting him be out there? You know what I mean? Like,
and that right there, if you maybe don't have a background, if you're not so familiar with firearms, that right there is going to push you over the edge.
100%.
That right there, the emotional investment in that right there can have somebody deciding a particular way that they wouldn't otherwise decide.
Yeah.
So
well, and the legal system, like you said, we think of it as a system, like it's a machine. It's comprised of people,
right?
And we're all infallible,
Plenty of error,
and we're just as capable of being swayed, and we're just as capable of being convinced, or and I'm sure that's a big issue for you guys with jury selection.
Absolutely,
it's trying to weed out people who have a really strong prejudice on something. Nah, dude, it's fascinating. It's fascinating. Just curious, has there ever been a really high profile case that you were like, I really wish I was able to defend that guy?
I have some very high profile cases, and I've had some very there's a lot that comes with taking these types of cases. There's a lot of additional weight.
I'm sure.
I'm very proud of my reputation in this space, but it's very difficult representing people that you genuinely believe are innocent.
I was going to ask you that.
And having the stress of that.
Yeah.
Resting on your shoulders, and then just knowing, and the bigger the case and the more noise around the case, the more the weight. And I think I don't necessarily feel like I would have liked to have argued this case or that case per se, but I don't shy away from those types of cases when they come my way. In other words, I'm not looking for that additional stress. I'm not just looking to get involved just because I feel very strongly about a particular position.
Yeah.
And I'm not one to really follow a lot of the stuff as it's happening on television because it's just so much. There's so much going on in my particular personal space every day with all the different people I'm representing.
I can't remember what movie it was, but they had a line like that where they said the most dangerous client is a truly innocent one, and that'll mess with you.
It haunts you, yeah. It's the whole time. It just continues to. I don't sleep when I'm on trial.
Yeah.
And people don't understand that. I don't sleep when I'm on trial, and I feel like I'm personally on trial.
Yeah.
And so it's a lot. It's a lot.
This is just personal, just thoughts and stuff. If you had a magic wand, and you were able to go ahead and change anything in our legal system right now, what do you think you would go ahead and change?
In this country?
Yeah.
First thing comes to the top of my head, uniformity. We have no uniformity.
Gotcha.
It's so scary to represent people, here in Colorado, you have the ability to stand your ground. You're not being, you at least have that much going for you. There might be some things that are very much not in your favor, but there's a very big disparity in laws in this country. So when you have various different states, now I know everybody knows this, but you have duty to retreat states where you have an affirmative obligation to try to do whatever you can to get away from your attacker, from somebody's attacking you. Mm-hmm. And then you have your castle doctrine states, and you have your stand your ground law states. And you can either have a state that's at the end of the day, every state is either a stand your ground law state or a duty retreat state. Some states are stand your ground law states, but they don't recognize the terminology stand your ground law. But they are. You're entitled legally. You're legally entitled to stand your ground and defend yourself where you're at, assuming you're legally entitled to be there. You can't break into somebody's house and say, I'm standing my ground. But you're legally entitled to stand your ground and defend yourself if, in fact, you reasonably believe you're about to receive great bodily harm or death. Defend yourself with your firearm. Yeah. And then yet you have other states where you have an affirmative obligation to get the hell out of there and to try to get to a safer place when you're being attacked. And you just touched on Monday morning quarterbacking. Yeah. And it's just like it's so very convenient for a judge or 12 strangers to look at it from a chair, sitting down in a chair in a comfortable courtroom. I mean, they might not want to be there, but they're not dealing with that type of fear. They're not being attacked in that type of way. No. And they're hearing all this different stuff. And what you faced in a matter of seconds or sometimes milliseconds, and you had to react in a matter of seconds and sometimes milliseconds. Yeah. They are facing that over the course of, some of these cases can go on for weeks. They're facing that over the course of weeks sometimes, where they're getting all this different information. It's all being dropped in front of them very conveniently, just like that high def picture of the football game, and somebody sitting at home looking at what the quarterback's facing when the quarterback's getting rushed by all these by all these different people that look like they're going to kill him. So I think that when you look at it from that perspective, you realize what you're up against, and you realize you can at the same time you can also realize just how easily you can be taken advantage of, how easily the system really starts to make things that much more complicated for you because people don't have that information, to weigh when they're being attacked.
No, it's a really good point. I talk about that with firearms. I've found that the vast majority of people who are vehemently opposed to firearms have almost never shot them. And so, and I've said this often. I went down and testified at the Capitol when they were putting Senate Bill 2503 forward. And I said that I would love to sit down and have a conversation with a true firearms expert who is pro-gun control. The problem is that person doesn't fucking exist.
Very accurate.
I've yet to ever find somebody who actually knew what they were talking about when it came to guns or self-defense, who is saying, you shouldn't be able to
defend yourself.
Yeah, it was that was probably the most frustrating thing was, and again, I don't claim to be an expert in firearms, but that was the most frustrating thing was talking to these politicians and the way they were describing the way they were talking. I just was like, you've never shot a gun. Well, see, I can just tell.
That's just it, because when you were asking me the question, what would I want to change with the system? That's just it. You don't have uniformity. So you have these different states, because you have state laws, you have federal U.S. law. But you have these states that all enact their own laws, and I was telling you before, there's ignorance of law is no excuse. It's a very popular saying.
I didn't know I couldn't do that.
I didn't know. Well, that's too damn bad.
It doesn't matter.
You did it, and there are the consequences for it. But this then becomes a thing of ignorance of geography. So you could just not know, and some people don't know when they cross state lines. Sometimes, you know,
Right.
you could go to the grocery store. Some people could go to the grocery store, and on their way to the grocery store, which could be a 5-minute, 10-minute drive, they could be crossing a state. They could be crossing a state line, and not even know it. You know, initially, obviously, if they're going to the grocery store all the time. But you know, the thing of it is, now you have to be concerned with geography, and you can be vacationing or visiting a different state, visiting relatives in a different state, and you can have your firearms with you. You could be transporting your firearms in a way that in your state is perfectly legal, but in their state it's a felony. You could be defending yourself in your state. You wouldn't have any affirmative obligation. You know, I lectured recently out in Baltimore, and they have a duty retreat, you know, laws out there. It's vastly different when you're talking to groups of people, when they're talking about how they're going to defend themselves and what their concerns are, what they have to navigate through. And
that's a great point, because specifically in the Northeast there, all those states, you can drive through them in 20 minutes. Like Delaware.
Right on top of each other, right?
Yeah, exactly. And they all, you're right, that's a great point, because they can all have totally different laws. And you're just like, well, I don't live in this state. I was just visiting my buddy over here. It was a 45-minute drive.
Right.
But apparently you guys have totally different laws.
You know who knows these? You know who knows these laws very well? Increasingly better and better as time goes on? Criminals.
Okay.
They know, they're becoming better educated in terms of what they can get away with, because of just how much is on the news and what's actually happening, and how these different things, how this stuff rolls over. They can tell. They're different states. They know. They see different things on the news. You know, it used to be in this state you had to take at least $300 before you're being charged with, you know, before you're being charged with a certain, you know, charge concerning your shoplifting. Now it's $1,000. You know, but you're not going to the police. You're not going to a police station unless you've stolen this much. They basically know what the heck. They know what their boundaries are in terms of what they can get away with before they have to really answer to something, and they kind of navigate around these things.
Yeah, I saw a video of a lady shoplifting, and the security guard was trying to stop her, and she just kept saying, "Your company has a no contact policy."
That's exactly
like ignore the fact that I'm stealing this right in front of you, but she's like, "You're not allowed to be touching me." Like, your company has, like you said, they researched him. We're like, "No, you're not allowed to grab me."
We had different jurisdictions doing the looting where police were helping people to their cars, just telling them you just got to leave. They're carrying tons of stuff they've just stolen, saying you have to get out of here. I'm not going to do anything. You've already stolen it. Just get in your car and get out of here. They're escorting them to their vehicles, and you got different mayors and different governors that are also endorsing, these different rules and these different rules of engagement as it pertains to police when they're dealing with different people that they're dealing with. It's not that police don't make mistakes, and it's not that there aren't bad police out there. There are bad police out there. Right. There are bad teachers out there. There are bad doctors out there. There are bad lawyers out there. There's bad people in just about every area of
bad salespeople
life.
Out there.
There are bad people. We talked about earlier. Humans naturally we have fault. We are not without fault. So there are bad people, and the idea here to go ahead and say that all police are bad, or to limit what our police are able to do right now, has people that much more concerned about what the heck they're going to do if in fact they're being attacked. So it's a very vicious, it's a very ugly cycle. And I think that, going back to the question again, if you were to have some uniformity on what these rules of engagement encompass for the residents, for the police, we had some sort of uniformity, we could in some way hope to help restore some of what we're dealing with.
No, I agree. I think if you don't have a standard set to base it off of, well then define reality, define truth to me.
Right. You go to other countries and they have a uniform, rules and laws across.
No, we deal with that a lot with concealed carry, as far as what states have reciprocity, and it's super confusing, and it makes it so it's like, so I can drive through here and I can carry, but when I'm through this state, I have to have it locked up and in this box and a whole thing.
And then even if you have it locked up, then sometimes there's a question as to whether there's a ban on that particular firearm and how that's supposed to be treated, in different states weigh in on that differently.
No, that's a whole other issue.
But I mean, that's just it. That rabbit hole just continues to go on and on and on.
Yeah.
If you had some uniformity, where there's talk about reciprocity with respect to with concealed carry, but if you had uniformity for all these different laws, there wouldn't be such a guessing game.
No, that is a fair point. Talk a little bit about police, because I'm interested. I think people have an idea that you being a defense attorney, that you would be not anti-police, but that you would think that they're not doing their job. But I don't think that's the case. I think people have an idea in your head that because you're trying to get somebody off, that you're trying to like release criminals. And based on my time spending with you, you do this because you are actually trying to uphold the law and some order. So what kind of changes would you want to see on the police level?
In terms of what they're able to do, what they're not able to do?
Yeah.
Well, it's a difficult balance there. I mean, you've got, just look at carjacking, for example. You have a lot of these people that are out that are robbing people at gunpoint and sometimes shooting them and taking their vehicles. Then they're speeding off in these vehicles. And police can only pursue, in the majority of these jurisdictions, can only pursue these vehicles at a particular speed because it just looks like somebody's speeding. They have no discretion to be able to go until they're armed with a little bit of additional information. They have no discretion to be able to pursue these people.
Yeah.
And criminals know this. And the number of times that I'm seeing, different crimes associated with these people that are stealing these vehicles and crashing them, killing others, killing themselves. That's dangerous. I think we have to, and the fact that we make it so generally known what the limitations are on what police can do. Again, criminals they're taking notes.
Yeah.
And they're taking advantage of that. So I don't know that there's a specific thing per se. I think that we have some underfunded police departments throughout this country. We've always had underfunded police departments, and I think that it would be helpful to have it so that there's something addressing that, because I think that in fairness, police, you're in an underfunded police department, and in all probability, you're in an area which is probably which probably has a bit more crime than the next town over that doesn't have those issues. So I think that we should potentially consider how we can address getting the proper training to these different police and these different police departments that are dealing with more crime in their villages or cities or towns. I think that's something helpful. As far as building what the police can and can't do, I mean, it's in terms of expanding their discretion. Discretion can be too much. Discretion can be dangerous in just about anybody's hands. But I think that we've just limited. We should have training that specifically addresses these situations, so we can work on giving some of that discretion back to the police, so that if they have to pursue a vehicle or they have to deal with a particular situation in this particular way, they have that training behind them, so we can afford them a little bit more immunity, discretion in what they do, because you're not always going to be right. I mean, that's part of the problem.
Yeah.
And police themselves have to make a lot of these very quick, spontaneous decisions that we talk about when you and I talk about self-defense cases. Majority of these people have to make these decisions in a matter of seconds, and they're only provided with so much information. And a lot of times what police are doing right now is they're like, hey, I'm going to err on the side of just not doing anything,
right?
Because I don't want to lose my job or get criminally charged or whatever the situation might be.
Yeah, it reminds me of my brother lives out in Portland, and Portland went kind of full swinging in a different direction, right? So they decriminalized the possession of basically all drugs, which I was actually for.
Okay.
However, I believe that there's two parts that I think you use the money that you're saving on incarcerating somebody, and you need to push them towards treatment, right? But they didn't do that. So what ended up happening was you had situations where people were doing illegal stuff and the DAs were flat out saying, we're not going to prosecute. So you had however many, I can't remember how many thousands of unresponded to 911 calls, because the cops are just going, we're not going to go waste our time, potentially get attacked,
right?
To go arrest this guy that's going to get let out of jail in 45 minutes.
Right, you're not going to carry that on your end, so yeah.
Right.
That's the incentive.
And so I think that's definitely, I agree with you. It's not just a baseline on laws, But yeah, I think we have to come to an agreement as a country. Are we going to prosecute? And I think as a bigger issue, it needs to be, what is the point of prison? Is it actually reform, or is it punishment?
It's a great question. Yeah.
Because I think so much of what we've done is we've created this system that just makes criminals better criminals, and by the time that they get out, if they don't have any other options, they're just going to go back to what they know. And so I think if I could change anything, I would look at it as, how can we actually take a really horrible situation and figure out what do we need to do to make this person reassimilated back into society afterwards.
With the understanding that some people, unfortunately, you've got some inherently bad, intrinsically bad apples out there. So
Richard Pryor
it's
had
unfortunate.
That.
But
No, you're right. Richard Pryor had a bit about that where he went around doing comedy at prisons, and he thought like, oh, this is gonna be great. I'm gonna be in there like, hey, stay strong, brother. Like, you got this, man. He goes, all I can say after leaving is thank God for prisons. It's like there's some dudes in there that need to be in there. No, dude, I think like I said, I really appreciate you coming in today to give us a different perspective, because I think you're absolutely right. I think one of the biggest problems we have in this country is everybody is Monday morning armchair quarterbacking stuff.
And there's something I didn't cover from earlier, and it was bothering me because I was trying to remember what it was. We were talking about the time that the average people are in custody for different types of charges. And many of these, the majority of all of our states have some form of a speedy trial act where you can demand trial, and after you demand trial, the prosecution has to go forward with the trial within so much time, depending on it changes from state to state.
Okay.
Otherwise, arguably the matter gets thrown out. It has to be dismissed because it violates the person's constitutional rights at that point. And so a lot of people are like, hey, you know what? I've been criminally charged. They're not letting me out. I want to demand trial. And when an attorney says, okay, I'm demanding trial on behalf of this client, as a general rule, what you're telling the judge and what you're telling the prosecutor's office is, I'm ready to try this case right now. So you're entitled to discovery. And all these, as a general rule throughout this country, you have felony cases, you're entitled to all the evidence that they intend to use against you. You're entitled to have that turned over. The defense is entitled to look at that evidence and go over that evidence, have an opportunity to review that evidence, so they have an idea what the heck they're dealing with in terms of the charges and the totality of what to expect. When you demand a trial, you're basically foregoing that right.
Okay.
So, and they know this. So prosecutors have they get all this stuff brought to them on a silver platter very often. I mean, sometimes they're pulling teeth with certain departments and certain people, and sometimes there's a real backup, in the labs, in the state labs, or wherever whoever else is involved. But as a general rule, they have access to this evidence much easier than anybody else.
Gotcha.
And so these cases go on and on and on very often just because discovery is not being turned over. So somebody's sitting in custody and the evidence hasn't actually come in, or not enough of the evidence to fill any particular way about being able to know how you're going to proceed.
Yeah.
They're sitting in custody, and so you have some people that just sit there and sit there and sit there, and they are innocent of what they did. And that's what I'm talking about in this space. I'm not talking about just generally. There's a lot of different ways you can get criminally charged.
Yeah.
But in the self-defense space, you have somebody just sitting and sitting and sitting, and you have the prosecutor during the bond hearing saying, hey, this person is definitely did this. During the preliminary hearing, this person definitely did this.
No.
There's a reason to proceed with charges against this person. There's a reason to have this person locked up and detained, or to have a very extremely high bond, which isn't realistic. Nobody's going to post it. They're very convinced about that, and they argue it as though they have access to all this evidence. But when it comes time to demand that evidence, the arraignment's taken place, and you're asking, okay, give me the evidence, turn over the evidence. This is called discovery. Turn over the discovery. Yeah. You're waning and you're waning and you're waning and you're waning in jail.
Yeah.
If in fact you're involved in these situations and you can't get out, you don't have the money to bond out, or you don't have the proper representation or the ability to argue a reason why you should be allowed out. or you're in front of the wrong audience and the person in the robe is very anti-firearm, is not going to let you out just merely based off of what it is that you're alleged to have done. So that's what helps to kick the can down the road, so to speak, and helps to delay the trials of these cases, and gets people to the point where they're just like, hey, I've been in here forever. Let me just take a plea. I'll just finish up in prison time instead of jail. I'll just finish up in prison, and I'll be out in so long, and at least I can be done with this nightmare that just continues to exist. Jeez. So again, there's a lot in the system that needs help. There has to be some additional rules in terms of changing the system a second way. Yeah. There has to be some rules on how quickly they have to provide this evidence. If they're that convinced that somebody committed this crime or did this particular thing, start turning over the evidence a lot quicker. Right. There should be some sort of, and some jurisdictions do something like that, but it's certainly not uniform, and it doesn't really exist on the whole.
Right. So talk to me really quick. How did you get involved with USCCA in the first place?
Fun story. So I was told by a buddy of mine, a gun-loving buddy of mine. Mm-hmm. He's a USCCA member, and he was telling me all these different things that USCCA has to offer. And he said, on top of that, they also have this self-defense liability insurance for their members. If you're a member, you have self-defense liability insurance through this other insurance, this insurance company that they have. He said they told us that I asked about it, and I said, I have a buddy of mine that does defense work. Could he potentially be my attorney? God forbid I ever get involved in this. And they said, well, you can choose anybody. You can choose anybody you want. We're not one of, there's certain organizations you have to go with their people. And they're like, you can choose any attorney in the state and in the country to represent you. Yeah. And he goes, well, yeah, I'd like to have my buddy. So they said, well, that's fine. So he says, hey, so I just so you know, I told him that I'd like you to represent me if anything ever happens and they're going to pay you. And I said, well, I wouldn't be too sure of that. Yeah. A lot of insurance companies, when they're dealing with attorneys, they fight about this and they fight about that. And they fight
they're not in the business.
The cost is right. Yeah. Exactly. No. And so he said, do you mind, if I put your name in a hat so that other people can actually know that you're with it? And I thought, well, I'm not going to continue to beat this up. He wants to do this. It's the thought of it is very generous. He's trying to get, he's trying to do this. And so I said, sure. So one day I get a phone call. I don't know what hour it was. I get a phone call, and I think it was 2017 is when I had my first, represented my first member from the USCCA. And I get a phone call from this member. I'm talking to him about his case. This situation just happened. He hadn't been criminally charged. He was just involved in a self-defense shooting. He actually ended up shooting 2 different people. He was trying to defend himself against the one, and because the complaining witness's friend was so close behind, mm-hmm. He shot at the complaining witness, tried shooting him in the leg, which is very unusual. Obviously, you're not saying, hey, but he tried shooting him in the leg. He's pretty good. He's a pretty good shot, and he served in the military. He tried shooting him in the leg, but his glasses got knocked off his face when this guy had come at him. Mm-hmm. So he didn't have his glasses on. He missed the guy, hit the guy behind him, and then the second one he immediately shot and hit that guy too. So he hit both of them in the legs, which is a pretty good shot in of itself. Yeah. But he hits both of them in their legs, and he's been criminally charged. And he's asking, he's like, I don't know what to do. This is what just happened. This is how I was approached. This is how this whole thing went down. And I left. I was scared to death. I don't know if there are other people. I left the scene. So he needs some immediate consultation. Mm-hmm. He's not a client. I'm on the phone, and I'm speaking to him immediately about what the heck, I think he should be doing right now. Yeah. And give him advice as to what to do, and tell him where I'm going to meet him, how this whole thing's going to go down. This happened in Chicago. I know Chicago police are going to be swarming. They're going to be wherever he's at immediately. So anyway, I'm walking him through this whole thing. The reason I'm saying all this stuff is I'm doing that just goodwill purposes, because he tells me USCCA member. I don't even really put 2 and 2 together about what the heck he's talking about, USCCA member. Mm-hmm. But I'm telling him, hey, this is what you need to do, this is what you need to do, and I'll do this, and we'll plan on doing this afterwards. I meet with him afterwards to discuss the retainer on the case. Right. And my retainer for getting involved in those particular charges is a minimum $30,000 up front. Right. That doesn't cover the case. It doesn't remotely cover the case, but it shows that you're invested, and I'm not going to be my firm. Just from experience, when you do a lot of these cases, you don't want to be chasing money.
Right.
Your focus should always be on representing
case.
your client,
Yeah.
not on getting money. So that's why I charge very realistic minimal retainers up front, and then they have to replenish those retainers as the case goes. And so I had him sign this retainer, and it's for $30,000 up front. And I said, I'm going to tell you right now, I've never dealt with the USCCA before, because he again tells me he's with the USCCA. I said, but I'm going to forward this over to, just tell me who you've been speaking to, and I'll forward it over to them, and they'll decide what they're doing. And even though you've signed to be responsible for it, if they're not going to be responsible for it, I'll let you off the hook. You can decide whether you want to take this out of your own pocket or whether you want to go to an attorney that's less expensive.
Yeah.
But I'll submit it. I submitted it. He told me that they called him, and they said, "What do you know about this David McDermott guy?" And he said, and he said, "Why? What's wrong?" And they said, "Well, this is a pretty high retainer. We don't usually get retainers that we're paying out this much up front." And he said, "Well, this is the attorney I want, and you told me I could choose whatever attorney I want." And he said, "This is the guy that I want fighting for me."
Yeah.
And he said some other positive things, but anyway, they said okay. They called me and they said, "Your check's in the mail. You get started right away. You got to be in court. Go take care of that. You trust that the check's in the mail," and I did, and it was in the mail. I've never had them reject a case that I've gotten involved in. Not once. Never have they rejected a case.
It's been a good experience.
And I've never had an issue with payments. And these cases just keep on. The case that I referenced out of Compton, California, that was a USCCA matter, and no flinching at all. $500,000 out, that they paid for this woman that was in no position to be able to pay this. There's these amounts of money on her own.
Yeah, I mean, that was a big part of why we brought it on. Obviously, our memberships are the lifeblood of our organization. It keeps people coming in, and it keeps us able to work with them. But so many of our members, we're very close with. Right? We know them all on a first name basis, know their families.
I've seen that. It's really, you guys got something really special in your shop.
And so that was a big part of this, because we've done everything on our front end to make sure that they are prepared, like I said, with all the equipment, with the training, that they can come use our range. Whenever I'm training my sales guys, I always tell them I want them to always know when they meet you, I've got a guy. And if I ever have questions, if I need help with something, I'm not going to go to Google. I'm not going to go to Cabela's. I've got a guy. I'm calling Tanner. I'm calling whoever, right?
Yeah.
And so that was a big reason why we wanted to partner with USCCA, because we try to treat these guys like family. And I think that there was a glaring hole left in the space of, okay, we can arm you and we can train you and send you out in the world, but what happens if you actually have to use it?
Right.
And so, I think that for anybody watching, this will be my brief pitch. Obviously, we have our memberships that give you unlimited range access, and you're going to be able to get discounts on training, on equipment, ammo, everything you need. But the biggest thing is making sure that you guys are covered in the event, God forbid, that you actually do have to use your firearm to defend yourself or your family. We wanted to make sure that you were covered, and after researching a lot of these different companies, we came to the conclusion that USCCA was the best option that we could go ahead and give our members. So if you are interested, if you're currently in a membership, we would be happy to go ahead and switch you over so that you have both the USCCA coverage and access to our facilities. If you are not a member, come on down. We can get you a better discount than if you went out on your own. And it's something that we're really proud of to be able to offer to you guys. I tell you guys every week on the show that thank you so much for being here and watching this, because this wouldn't exist if it weren't for you guys. Dave, thank you so much for being on today, man. I really appreciate it. I could have talked to you for hours. Really, really appreciate the work that you're doing.
I
don't think it's I don't think people realize how much that goes into all of this. And it's, I can tell you guys just from experience of meeting with you and working with you and stuff, that this is a lot more than just a job for you. That this is something that you care passionately about. And as things get crazier and crazier out there, it's really, really nice and comforting for me to know that there are people out there like yourself, like USCCA, who are actually going to be able to come and help law-abiding people who are just trying to get home, right? So, Lawyer Jesus, thank you so much for coming in, brother. I really, really appreciate it. It's been awesome working with you. Yeah, anything else you want to say? Anything you want to throw out to people?
No, I did say it already, and just returning the shout out. That it's from my perspective, from doing as much of this as I do, all over the country. There's a tremendous difference from people that are properly educated, properly trained when I'm representing them. It makes for a much easier defense than it would otherwise be. So, you are a part of that solution. DCF is a significant part of that solution. And I just, again, for whatever it's worth, reciprocally, I just want to tell you, I've just been introduced recently, obviously, to really a bit more intimately understanding what it is that you do, what this organization does for its members. And what you just said was right on point. I come here. You have this, a very significant number of people that showed up on a weeknight, to further their education. There are people standing outside as well that couldn't get in, that are standing outside because there's so many people that showed up. And that's a testament to what you guys do and how well you do it and how you connect with people out here, because it's those people are better trained. And because of it, they're going to be less likely to not necessarily less likely to find themselves in a situation where they're being attacked. I hate to say that, but that's just not something we can't avoid. All this, all these ugly things that happen out there. We can hope, pray that they don't happen to us, but we can't necessarily avoid it. But to the extent that it happens, you can minimize your exposure. You can minimize the likelihood of being charged, and you can minimize the likelihood of being found guilty. And you can do that. You can do a tremendous amount to minimize all that by proper training, proper education, and DCF is really good in that regard. I'm not getting paid to be here. So for people that are watching, it's not. I'm not. There's no incentive for me to be saying that. I legitimately feel that way.
No, thank you, man. Thank you so much. So, awesome. Well, we're running off to another seminar at our West location, so we'll get ready for that. But thank you so much, brother. Really appreciate it. Thank you guys so much for tuning in. As always, if you have a topic or a product or anything that you are interested in us doing a segment on, please leave a comment below. I'd be happy to go ahead and do that. Thank you so much. Happy late Thanksgiving. I don't think I said it last time before we taped, so hope you had some good times with your family. And stick around. We'll see you guys next week. Thank you.